Dr. Millicent Rose. What a great name. I love it. Thank you for coming on to talk about this today. I'm just fascinated by this and how the human brain works. So can't wait to pick your brain a little bit today. Can we start with hearing about you? Tell me about yourself, your background, where you practice.
Sure. So I am a professor of clinical psychology. I practice out of Los Angeles, California. My private practice is in Playa Vista. I have another office in Brentwood. And then I am a professor in the Graduate School of Education and Psychology at Pepperdine University. And so my specialization is trauma. I have a specialization in trauma, group therapy, substance abuse. I feel like I'm missing like 19 of them. Because you
A
just
lot of
end up
traumas.
yeah, you just end up piling them on after a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, my greatest thing is just to be of service to others and to help people to learn. I love imparting either the knowledge or wisdom of what's going on between the way a person's brain works and then sometimes the way that their behavior. I think the ultimate thing that I always hope that people know is no matter what they're going through, like recovery is on the table, right? Recovery isn't just a thing for like substance abuse, it's for a multitude of things. But the first thing that you have to have is mastery knowledge over what you're going through, maybe some of its origin story, and then just some support to navigate your way into a life that marries both your experiences with wherever it is that you want to be.
Okay. Well, hopefully you can give some hope to our listeners today who are dealing with fears and phobias when it comes to weather. I can imagine, and you can verify this, that this is like pretty common. Is that something you commonly have dealt with?
Yes, actually, especially when I work internationally,
Hmm.
and different weather systems that people become accustomed to. The interesting thing about phobias and fears around weathers is society will impart an idea of like desensitizing you to weather. And so the person who has acquired a fear or phobia actually feels outcasted or singled out. They feel obscure, like they're different because everyone else around them isn't mirroring, right? So I live in California, while not necessarily a weather system, but a natural event that we deal with here is earthquakes. And there's a running joke out here. If there's an earthquake, you wake up, you double check if your TV is still mounted on the wall. If it is, you go back to sleep, right?
There's similar jokes here on the East Coast when it comes to thunderstorms and hurricanes.
Yeah, so people become desensitized and society becomes desensitized. In fact, your government, even your schools promote ideas around desensitization. Hey, have your little emergency pack at school, and that's the best that we can do. That's what's within our control. Now, a fear or a phobia, there's two things that I'll emphasize that happen there. A person who has had a real experience, and everyone, I won't say everyone, but then they've had experiences where people have gaslit them around that real experience to say, well, it's kind of imagined. You can move on beyond that. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, we just deal with that regularly. And so I was just working on a workshop with some individuals who live in Costa Rica, and their rain season can be very overwhelming and very impactful. Mudslides, things that, I think most people that live there are just like, yeah, you just kind of work around it. It is what it is. But there was a young lady who was just sharing, like, no, it freezes me. I can't go to work if it's raining like that. I'm scared about what's going to happen. And so when I'd asked her questions about her experience, the reality is she'd had a real experience that was life threatening around a weather system. And what she ultimately took away is that she's helpless. And the only thing that she can do to help herself is to freeze, right? Because we have our stress responses: freeze, fawn, fight, flight. And then there's another one called flock, which I'll explain a little bit later on down the line. And so she freezes, and that's like her response. And then nobody normalizes her fear or her concern or says, hey, like, you've been through something that actually makes sense that you have that concern. Now, because you have that concern, how do we build a life around you that accommodates your real world experience instead of just treating you like somebody who imagined this or somebody who doesn't have to worry?
Yeah. Okay. Let's go back to the root. Is it always, are fears and phobias always coming out of some sort of trauma, or can they be kind of created in the world that you just live in? Like if your parents are like, watch out for thunderstorms, are you going to develop a fear of thunderstorms?
I think it depends on how you see your parents respond to a thunderstorm, right? It's going to be a learned behavior in that situation. So, yes, I don't think it always has to be traumatic, but if my mom grabs me and my younger siblings into a closet for 9 hours every time there's a thunderstorm, like that's going to cultivate a response and something in learned helplessness that I'll acquire from my parents. Can you watch something and then start to develop a real fear? Yes, 100%. I would say the nature of what you're observing is still going to be something more documentary style than it's going to be like watching Jurassic Park style, right?
Yeah.
But even then, I one of my other specializations is I do work and provide trauma informed care on set, very specific for documentaries. And what I know about documentaries is they edit a lot out so that people don't get so fear induced that they don't finish the documentary, right? Like that's not
Mm.
where documentaries like to land. But it's possible that people can read things and then interpret what they're reading as unsafe, which then cultivates a fear. I met a woman last year who had heard something from a friend about Fiji's weather system and how in Fiji the weather system actually plays into on the beach these pockets that just look like sand, but they're actually where poisonous snakes go to hide themselves from the weather system. And so, that passing information is going to
Yeah.
it's something very well. But this woman was just saying now she feels funny going to Venice Beach. Or I was like, I don't think you have to worry about that in Venice Beach, but I can understand if you haven't actually learned, found corrected information, if you've been passed down something in scarcity or in fear, then it's going to once again induce like learned helplessness.
Okay, so can you also differentiate between being scared of something and like a real fear and phobia? Because I don't think I understood this until I developed one, and just how like debilitating it can be. Because yes, I'm scared of thunderstorms, but like I should be. They're not safe, right? I go inside, but I have a real fear of turbulence in an airplane, and when that happens, it creates a response that is very out of my control. Like I don't know which one of those responses it is, but it's something I'm working through with a therapist as well. So can you differentiate the difference between being scared of something and having like this debilitating fear or phobia?
Yeah, definitely. So let me start with fear. Fear is healthy. For most of my patients that I work with, what I work on is how do we have a healthy relationship with fear? Fear is one of the things that we use to stop us from like running in and out of traffic. It's a part of your alert system. It is there designed with intention to send you messaging, to keep yourself safe, to not necessarily kick you into survival mode, but to remind you of what you need to do to survive. So it's okay to have a fear of abandonment or a fear of like rejection.
Those are
Um,
bad things.
right? They're like, I don't want to continue to live lens through that. And so it's like, hey, maybe there are things that we need to improve about our personality or our character that allows us to avoid some of these negative dynamics. And so they have intention, they have purpose. Now, if you're going into a phobia, you're kind of basically tying into your highest sense of an alert system. You're in that fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or flock, right? And you're going to find yourself stuck there. So the fixation around the stuckness is this is a threat to my life. This is a threat to my well-being. In fact, if we put your brain under scan, my frontal lobe is going to shrink, my amygdala is going to change in size, and other parts of my brain will also kind of shift because I'm going into survival mode. And that's when you start to see a phobia. Now, a phobia with turbulence, like in the air, that's like one example. Sometimes I will consult on cases with children who they become fixated on a phobia at a specific age. And so they're stuck on spiders. We've all been there. I don't like spiders. I definitely understand. But but they've become fixated. And so what I tend to find out is that there's something else that's gone on in their life that has sent them into survival mode. And the phobia, which should have been a natural passing phobia, age appropriate, has gotten stuck during that time, right? So when you develop fear or a phobia can also be predicated on what else is going on in your life. So if you had the loss of a loved one and then got on a flight and there was turbulence and you were like on the way to a funeral, those two things may pair together and kind of send you deep grief, the trauma of losing a loved one, together with, okay, I thought I was about to go and join that loved one, and now I'm processing all of those pieces together. But what it is they really stick to your alarm system. So, like you called it debilitating, which is going to be another form of like freeze. If you see other people during turbulence, you might see them fight, right? Like they're like, all right, where's the emergency exit? I'm going to get to the door. And you're like, whoa, like this is the last thing that we need. There are other people who disassociate and flight, and they're just like, the entire time during the turbulence, you might be flying with them. And you're like, hey, 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 are you paying attention? They're just like, because they're fully like disassociated and disconnected. The flock response is also kind of comparative. So I'll tell you what the flock response is. Flock is in a state of stress. I flock to those in close proximity to validate my experience as being real. So
I do that. That's what I do.
yes, yes, yes. It's so important, right? So I always give the example like, earthquake. Like, let's say you are here in California and there's an earthquake and we're both in the same room. We know the room is shaking. We know an earthquake is happening, but we're both going to stare at each other and be like, did you feel that? Right? Because I'm flocking to you to validate my experience as being real. I'll give the same example if we're out at brunch and our waiter is just rude and slamming down our receipt and just being dismissive and late with our order. Even though we know they're being rude, we're both going to be like, are you seeing this? Because I am asking you to validate my experience as being real. Now let's go back to turbulence, right? And your example, and then we'll also talk about weathers and different types of weather systems. What happens when I flock to my friend who's disassociated and they're not validating my
No
experience?
comfort. Yeah.
And they're just like, the entire time, it's like they're there, but they're not there. That actually is going to work me up even more. Right. So, same thing in a weather system. I lived in Georgia. Gotta love a good tornado randomly. And I once drove through a tornado system, not realizing that I drove through it. And then once I got to my destination, I put on the news and I realized, oh, all the cars were by the side so that their windows didn't get blown out. And I just went through it. Right. So when I get there and everyone's like, oh my gosh, you should have stopped. Why didn't you stop? And I'm flocking to them to validate my experience as being real and say, no, I didn't know. It wasn't obvious. It was raining, but it wasn't obvious. It was a tornado. And they're like, that's a really bad thing. You could have got your windows blown up. And I realized that actually started to stress me out even more. Now I'm like, every time it rains and I'm in Georgia, I'm going to pull up on the side of a freeway just in case it's a weather system that's going to take me out, right? So with weather systems, like I said, a lot of people can be desensitized to them. So you're going to be invalidated in your flock, right? It's like, oh, okay, yeah, that just happens. It is what it is. But you're fine though, right? Okay, great, wonderful. And then everybody just wants to move on. And not just our society that encourages us to move on. I'll be honest, local governments will encourage you to move on. They give you about as much information as you need to survive if you are caught in flash floods, like in Houston, where the plains, where it floods often. And there's just little signs there that remind you if it looks like a certain height, don't go into it. Otherwise, it could be really deep and you will drown. They give you just enough information to be pacifistic around it. So the person who has a specific phobia really does feel isolated and alone in that experience because not a lot of people will validate them.
Interesting. So, what would be a better way to convey weather information as a meteorologist? What can I do to help someone that does have a phobia rather than saying, well, when the thunder roars, go indoors, or if there's a tornado warning, take shelter? What else can I offer?
Yeah, definitely. I think the main thing to impart, and this kind of goes into a therapist area, but I think you're in a very good empowered position to share this information, that what the person is seeking is safety. And there are so many things that provide you safety outside of what's within your control and outside of your control. So designating, When you're indoors, get your safe blanket. Find your 3 safe girlfriends that you're going to be on a phone call with, and we'll have a little FaceTime party with some tea. Find a safe movie for you to watch, or things that impart a sense of safety. And then to also normalize, like, there's going to be those loud sounds, those noises. They are going to cause you dysregulation. Don't forget to keep your body moving, to stretch, to do any pelvic floor exercises, because that's where we store things that are like traumatic for us. But yes, having your little cup of tea, recognizing that here's the big sound. Maybe you want another big sound to overcome the big sound, or we want our noise canceling headphones that's just going to play some classical music for us or some relaxation music for us. But we can create our own version of safety. So in the middle of a storm, how do I create a sense of something that feels comforting to me? Comfort is still on the table, even if safety isn't guaranteed.
I love that. That is fascinating and so needed in our community, because we do just kind of state the facts. This is what we know works, but nobody ever really talks about the mental health portion of it, which is so important to survival as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. And if it is a major system, which I deal with this often with students, we have students who attend some of our classes across the country in our online program. So sometimes they get caught in weather systems, and you've got to love graduate students, because they'll be like, Dr. Rose, I'm still making it to class. And I'm like, no, you're not, because your safety is priority. Like, that doesn't make sense. I'll record the lecture for you and you can watch it later, right? But what we really want to be able to communicate is you're also going to have an experience the next day. That's what I'm asking my students to be prepared for. I understand they know how to keep themselves safe, but there's the aftermath too. Right? When I walk out, and it's not just like my rose garden is gone, it's my neighbor's house is gone. It's like my car is torn apart. The place where I take my kids to the park is no longer available. And this has happened in the same place year after year after year. What does it mean to brace yourself for that, and to have a secondary state of comfort or place for you to go to if possible? Because not everyone has that. Whether that's like, I'm going to go to my parents for a little bit, I'm going to go stay with a friend around this time of year for a few days. But that's also going to be a really big shock to their system. There's loss involved or grief involved. And it's not all grief is traumatic, but all trauma will ask and call for grief. Right. And so the next morning they have to prepare themselves for, there's the trauma of the system, and then there's the trauma of whatever I have to grieve afterwards.
Wow. Okay, so can we talk about, well, first of all, tell me, do you see like types of people that are most affected by fears and phobias? Like, are women more likely to develop a weather fear? Are men more likely? Is it more common in children?
I have not recognized a pattern. I would definitely have to go towards research to find out.
Mm.
In my experience, though, I've seen more women, and then men try to brave through it. So, what we know the difference between men and women, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about children. Men externalize, women internalize. And because we as women internalize, it's interesting. It kind of breaks down through our psyche and our mental wellness a little bit more. Men may be more inclined to, I'm going to take this out in a physical way. Most of my male clients are somewhere mountain biking right about now, if I'm thinking about it, or doing something very invigorating to have the expression afterwards. Children take cue from parents, parents and teachers. Those are their two sources of safety. So it really depends on the parental response. That's going to dictate how they are. If the parents are desensitized, you might find children who are desensitized. If the teachers are desensitized, you might find children who are desensitized. Now, if the parents are really overwhelmed, overstimulated, that's a different story. Having pets get overwhelmed, overstimulated. Children, interestingly, feel a sense of responsibility over their pets. So they don't take cue, they actually show up for their pets.
Hmm.
And then on the side of that, we also recognize our neurodivergent community, and specifically our children who are neurodivergent, where the overstimulation is really, really a lot for them. So we're definitely anticipating. And, parents in those situations should have a plan of action to reduce the stimulation, to also procure different ways of communicating safety to the child on different locales within the house. They will normally have their own plan of action, but they definitely want to be prepared in those instances.
All good points. Okay, can we talk about treatments? Because I've heard a lot of different options here. I've spoken to somebody who said exposure therapy is like the only way to go when it comes to any phobias around weather, but that's terrifying to people. And I know that if I apply that to my turbulence fear, it's terrifying to me. And I don't like that option. But there's a lot of other options out there. Can you kind of go through some of these different options for treating it?
Definitely. So, exposure therapy, here's what I'll share with you. When we go back to our founding fathers of psychology, exposure therapy, it's just been around a really long time. So, when it's been around longer, it tends to have higher rates of efficacy when we're looking at like research, right? So, the
Mm.
research backs it up.
Hmm.
Is it the most effective? There are a few other things that we are looking at in the field of psychology. Just kind of looking at what were before our founding fathers of psychology came in and said this is a phallic symbol, what were our ancestors doing? Right? Because they were still exposed to these. They had mental wellness, suicide, trauma, depression, anxiety have all existed since the dawn of time. So, what were they doing accommodate? And a part of it was exposure work, unfortunately. And a part of it were the things that I'd mentioned as well, which movement, music, things to re regulate your central nervous system. So while exposure therapy gets a big thumbs up, the most researched treatment modality is actually cognitive behavioral therapy because it pairs those pieces together. It's your cognition, so how I'm thinking in rationale. Keep in mind, my frontal lobe has shrunk. So there's a lot of impulsivity that's going on here, and a lot of irrational thoughts are happening. And then, together with my irrational thoughts, come my behaviors, which also may present as irrational. So, cognitive behavioral therapy is really about changing your thinking to change your behavior. Areas where I really do recommend, if you're looking at children, there's another subset we call TFCBT, trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy. Once again, most effective in research. It doesn't just treat the child, it also treats the parent, and it treats them both for trauma and for depression simultaneously. So that's when we're looking at children. Different ways to kind of go into maybe a trauma approach or treating a specific phobia outside of that. And this is kind of like the new kid on the block. It's not the new kid on the block, but it's definitely the one that everyone's going to, which is EMDR,
That's what I do for
right?
turbulence.
All right, good, good, good. EMDR is going to be because you're doing it within a safe environment. So remember what I was saying, Emily, like if you're having a night in and there's going to be thunderstorms and you can still create comfort. So you're going to confront those very difficult memories of experiences that you've had with turbulence or maybe with a weather system, but you're going to do it in a comforting space with relaxation, with soothing sounds. And then the goal is for you to be desensitized against those memories so that they don't invoke this alertedness out of you, right? EMDR is interesting. There's a multitude of reasons why it works. I don't think anyone's really been able to like pin down the real reason. But the way I'll scientifically explain it to you, your traumatic memories are incorrectly stored in your short term memory. So, like right now, where are your car keys?
Inside?
Inside.
In
Do
the
you know
kitchen.
where? In
In
the
the
kitchen?
kitchen.
Okay, good. Right. So, that is the exact same place where people's traumatic memories are stored. That's how accessible it is. See how quick it was for you to be like, oh, they're in the kitchen, they're in the house, they're in here, right? They're right there. They're way too accessible. And so, what we want for traumatic memories and experiences, we want them to be correctly processed into long term memory, which is what EMDR is doing, using, the rapid eye movement together with the reprocessing and then the desensitization. I don't know how yours is going. It's not the easiest process to start off with, but it's good work and it gets the job done, right?
Yeah. So I was like willing to try anything. Like I was headed for hypnosis next, but when this was explained to me, I'm a very like cynical person. And so I was like, that's not going to work on me. Like, it's absolutely not going to work. But I will say it's the first thing that has actually worked and helped me. And I've only been on one flight since I've started it, but it has made a world of difference. And the way it was explained to me, which this made sense, was it's almost like you're dreaming. It's like you're processing things that are hard and you process them. And then when you come out of it, you can handle it. You know, it's like when you go to bed angry and the world seems really hard, and then you wake up the next morning and you're like, what was I so worried about? I can handle this. That's how she described it to me. And that's kind of how it feels.
Perfect. All predicated on this idea of safety.
Yes.
Which, as we're talking, whether it's weather systems, turbulence, that's all we're asking for at the end of the day, is that we want to feel safe, and we want some security around the concept of safety. It doesn't have to be this great guaranteed thing. Tomorrow's not promised. We all recognize that, but we want to feel like we can be safe. And I'd like to feel safe in the part of my brain that knows where my keys are stored, right? I don't want to be like, where did I put my keys? Traumatic memory. Oh no, right? That's a lot. And that's where people really get stuck. And then now you're looking at like the phobia versus just like a generalized fear. And it becomes really overwhelming. So EMDR is going to be really good. Clinical hypnotherapy is a different discipline from mine, but I love my colleagues in clinical hypnotherapy. They'll have you back in the womb. And you'll be like, oh my gosh, my mom had tea for breakfast that day when I was in the womb.
My gosh, that's so wild.
It's magical. And you go back and you ask yourself in the room, like, what did you need? And you're like, I needed a safer birthing process. And then you're like, okay, that's what happened. I came into the world unsafe. That's what's going on.
I'm so scared that my kids are going to do this.
I fully anticipate.
They don't need anything else to blame me for.
Yeah, no, and my ex is a therapist too. So we've just already put money aside for their therapy in the future. Like, it's going to go down, and totally understand. So clinical hypnotherapy is really good. Once again, going towards, and we call these decolonized practices around mental health, sound therapy, animal assisted therapy, love a good sound healing session, music therapy, art therapy, dance movement therapy, trauma focused yoga. The list goes on and on and on and on. And it's not just your atypical, like I said, clinical psychology. If you can find anybody who has a discipline where they've really started to reach outside the four walls of traditional psychology, you're more likely to do well in that way. I send a lot of my clients off to a sound bath after a tough session. I'm like, okay, please go book yourself for a sound bath. I want you to set an intention with the sound bath to start releasing some of the things that you've been experiencing. A lot of my clients are in Zumba to shake that pelvic part.
Interesting. I didn't know that was still a thing.
Yeah, so to get your pelvic floor work done, because this is where we store trauma, especially us as women. Men and women, yeah, but especially us as women, we store at the back, which is where we have those contractions, and then at the front as well. But yes, if you get people moving, number one, mind-body reconnection happens with something as simple as Zumba. But what did our ancestors do to deal with trauma? They used to shake it off, right? You ever seen
a dog Taylor Swift?
Yeah, right. Basically, you ever seen a dog like shake, really like shake off after something's happened? They're shaking trauma off. But we also used to do something similar. So indigenous cultures, hula dancers, Moroccan belly dancers, they're all doing pelvic floor work, and they're shaking and releasing in process. So those are all the things that I encourage people to pair. Like, yes, do your CBT, do your EMDR, do your little safety practice, but get your behind over there to Zumba, sign up for a sound bath, put it all together so you understand the package for your wellness and your mental wellness. What keeps you healthy, what allows you to recover and like reclaim yourself, right? Even if the weather is outside of your control.
Yeah. Have you had like patience and success when it comes to this, where you've seen their life just completely turn around because something that kept them from even going outside, now they can actually live a free life?
Yeah. I would tell you, in my work, is probably the most rewarding thing. And they will try to give a lot of credit to their therapists. And I'm like, no, this is you. I'm here 50 minutes a week. But this is them. They start to see, what a good therapist should be is the holder of hope. So I'm here to hold hope. Like, I see you outside. I see you getting on a plane again. I see you going to Costa Rica during the rainy season. Like, I see you feeling confident about being able to go to Guatemala to go visit your family, regardless of what time of year it is. I see all of those things for you. You don't see them yet. I will hold on to them until you're ready to take them back from me. Right. And then eventually it's small steps, it's small little efforts in different directions. It starts with, I stepped outside when it was raining. I didn't ask the professor not to go to Malibu and be on campus because of the rain and the slides. I'm like, okay, little steps, and then it starts to emerge into bigger things. But people forget the feeling of success, especially when they've been exposed to something that's made them feel helpless. So you want little exposures to things that feel successful, things that made them feel triumphant, like they can do it. And then, yeah, after a while, it all starts to piece together. And they'll go for the big things, and they'll call me one day and they'll be like, Dr. Rose, I booked a flight to Italy. And I'll be like, you booked a flight to Italy? They'll be like, I flight to Italy. I'm like, okay, all right, let's go for it. I'm excited for you. Here you go. Here's the hope that you asked me to hold on to. It belongs to you.
Do phobias ever go away untreated? Did they ever just disappear?
For children, they can gradually grow out of them because they are, like I said, they're age appropriate, right? So I gave the example of spiders. I have a 10-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 4-year-old. Each one of them at some point have been afraid of strings.
Interesting.
Just little dangly things like this.
Wow.
Right? But this also mirrors a reptile, right? Or some type of worm or something like that. Very, very normal. And then one day they just grow out of it. Children. For adults.
I was going to say, at what age do you feel like it's too late? At what age can a parent be like, okay, we're at like age 13 now, they're not growing out of it? 13?
13, yeah. If they're getting to 13 and it's really still being impactful, then yeah, we have a problem. But it shouldn't be from ages 6 through to, are we 6? 0 to 5, there's one. And then, yeah, so we go from ages 6 through to 13. They should transition through, but it really shouldn't be overwhelming. Like, it's the same thing with like sleeping with the lights on, all those other little things. We want to see them naturally transition. For adults, if they develop a true phobia, they need assistance. I believe that everybody has resilience in them. That's another thing we want to look at when we're thinking about our ancestors and people before us, is that we all have the natural inclination to successfully overcome adversity. The damage that it can do on the way to naturally restoring itself is what we're concerned about. Right? So where did that take you to? Did that take you out of like your occupational functioning? Did you miss out on an opportunity for a promotion? Did you miss out on your sister's wedding because you're still really scared about the weather system in Louisiana and what happened when the levees broke? Right? I'm like, what are we talking about here? And how much impact and toll has it taken on your life? They could eventually get there. But I have worked with adults in their 60s, 70s who are still struggling. A few years back, I consulted on a case I live specifically in Long Beach, but in Long Beach, we have the Queen Mary. And a gentleman in his 80s was a part of the crew that built the Queen Mary. And a lot of people died building the Queen Mary, but his specific instance, he lost multiple friends and almost lost his life after there was a terrible rainstorm. And so he won't even touch foot in Long Beach. And that's become a phobia for him, as has rain, as has weather systems. He lives in a very specific part of LA where he doesn't have to deal with mudslides. If it does rain, it's not going to impact him. He won't go to Malibu. He won't go to certain parts of the Hollywood Hills. He's very specific after that happened. But that's the toll, right? Because he has a family who lives in Long Beach that he won't go and see, including his grandkids.
So we talked about like weather and natural disasters, but something else that loops in with this is climate change. And there's a lot of people, maybe it's not a phobia, but like really high climate anxiety about the future, anxiety about future generations and the earth and big picture stuff. Do you have any guidance for us there?
Yeah, I will lean into one of the theoretical orientations I mentioned to you earlier on, which was cognitive behavioral therapy, because it's very present focused. It's this idea of like what's within your control in this present moment. That's all the power that you have versus what happens if you look too far into the future. I don't know about yourself. I ran track a little bit. I did the 800 meters. I wasn't very good, but I did it anyway for like a few credits. But I always ask people if they did run track, do you watch the hurdles? Like we just had the world championships. Did you watch the hurdles? Now tell me what happens if you jump a hurdle too quickly.
You fall?
You're guaranteed to fail, right? So we've got to think about hurdles, when we get to them. I think there are things that we can do in preparedness. So what is your preparedness packet at your house? What is your preparedness kit, for you and your family? What is your method of communication if something were to happen, or, the climate takes a toll in a direction that, poses a threat to your well-being? There are things that you can do in preparedness, to each their own. When it comes to like family and kids, this is a really hard one, and I don't think everyone will agree with me on this one. I have a parenting philosophy. My parenting philosophy is that I can't stop my kids from getting hurt. I can stop them from putting their hand on the stove and all the basic stuff, but I cannot stop them from getting hurt. I can really only teach them how to get through difficult things, right? And whatever that looks like. And while I want my kids to be around and live forever, there's so much of that that's outside of my control. So what I like about CBT is I'm happy with like snuggles tonight. I am present with nighttime, book time reading, or I'm present with we're going to make cookies together. I'm present in those moments for the things that are outside of my control. And then what I can do to prepare myself, I will do. And then outside of that, unfortunately, we just have to hope that we as a community, everyone on Earth eventually is able to come together to give this wonderful planet what it deserves, and see how that plays out. But focus on what you can focus on, and that's where all your power is.
Yeah, I've done CBT too, and I'm a big fan. It's like a good for like really practical people too, because it's like a list of ways to find joy, and it's immediate.
Exactly. I think it's rooted in all the right stuff.
Yes, yes. Dr. Rose, is there anything else you want to share with us about getting through some of these tough times when it comes to weather, natural disasters, and big picture stuff?
Yeah, specifically for people who live in regions where they're constantly being exposed. Number one, please do not minimize the toll that that takes on you. Just because you've been exposed to it, just because you're used to hurricane season, just because you know how to wrap up your house and how to put the wood panels on your windows, doesn't make any of this normal. And so what I want to encourage is anticipate that people should have a normal response to an abnormal situation. It's okay to break down, to cry, to grieve, to experience a loss in a way that everybody else doesn't acknowledge. It's okay to seek help in those situations. And then once again, kind of going back to people who are in these regions where they're just constantly being exposed to different weather systems, don't forget to create, like I said, safety and comfort for yourself. You have, I always call them divine right? You have a divine right to peace of mind. And pursuing your peace of mind doesn't just end because we're in hurricane season. If it is, I need to leave a little earlier, granted, financially and everything else you're in a position to, please encourage yourself to do so. Go to places that will provide safety for you, even if it is temporary. And then once again, looking back at those who are your predecessors and ancestors, it is literally encoded in your DNA to survive. You have to know that resilience is on the other end of this. You're going to be okay, and it will be okay. Trust in that process, and then prioritize your comfort and your peace of mind.
That's very comforting itself. Is there a place that people can go to find help, like a central location if our listeners are kind of nationwide or even worldwide? Where can they find these resources?
Definitely. I would refer everybody over to the American Psychological Association. It's like this big psychological hub where you can find out all the resources, like what's the recommendation, what is the American Psychological Association saying on like weather systems and phobias, or working with kids, working with parents, and all the new research that's being published. And then there are additional directives if people are also looking for that direct, like one-on-one help as well.
And I love that people are talking about mental health more, because word of mouth is huge too. I've found resources through friends because friends talk about it.
Yep. And yeah, there's the stigma and shame is I will always tell my students this is not your grandma or your grandpa's mental health field anymore. The stigma and shame isn't there in that way. In fact, what you're more likely to experience is stigma and shame if you're not talking about it, right? Now it's like you're
Right.
with your girlfriends and they're like, well, I had anxiety and I had depression and I had postpartum. And there's the one friend who's like, and everyone's just looking at them. So what about you? Right. But in that same respect, we also recognize there are still some cultures who are navigating their way to understanding mental wellness and to remove the stigma and shame. But the generations that are coming up underneath those cultures are definitely advocating for it. So 10 years from now, I think it's going to look even better.